Hello. If we haven't met before, my name is Tanisha, and you don't really need to know what I do right now. If you'd like to, I can go into that another time. But right now, this conversation is on breathing. Breathing is something that obviously we all do. We are required to breathe if we are alive. With that being said, as we go throughout our days, as we create patterns, whether that's in movement or lack thereof, or stress or emotional states, all of these things affect our breathing. And so when I'm working with someone, and I'm often asked things, whether it's in the coaching field where I'm working on somebody's life and their choices and how they show up in the world, or whether that's with, say, body work and how they're moving through the world, I am frequently asked what I like to do to further that progress. And so, with that being said, across the board, one of my favorite places to start, no matter where you are experiencing pain, distress, stress, emotional confusion, where you're feeling like energetically blocked, whatever the case is, I love to come to the breath. The reason for that being is, while I do practice a very scientific mindset, I also practice a more energetic mindset. And when we blend these two together, so it's not too far in either direction, you get a really balanced approach. Now, as far as breathing goes, again, you've made your whole life this far, so congratulations, you know how to breathe. Now, it doesn't mean that you're breathing effectively or efficiently. Breathing activates 11 areas of the brain. So that being said, if we think of how we explore life, we are doing it all through the brain. Whether it's our brain processing what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we are physically sensing in our bodies, our brain is translating all of that. You may have even noticed that there are times that you have these runaway thoughts where you don't know why you're having them, and you catch yourself and you're like, man, that was a weird thing to think. So that's the brain doing its thing. Typically, we are in some state of survival mode because the brain's job, the nervous system's job, 100% of the time is to keep us alive. And with that being said, sometimes it's going to make choices for us to keep us alive that don't necessarily allow us to thrive. One great example of that is the metabolism reflex. So with that and breathing, if you are running and you're not getting enough oxygen while you're running, the brain is going to say, breathing is more important than running right now, even if we're running from a predator, because if we are not breathing, we absolutely cannot be alive. So it starts taking oxygen from our limbs so that we cannot run. It's going to force us to stop running and focus on breathing, because breathing is more important. Now again, it activates 11 areas of the brain. So if there was one specific exercise that I would give anybody to work on, it would be breathing. As breathing activates these various areas of our brain, if they are more active, more exercised, so to speak, then they're going to affect other areas of our life, whether that's our balance, whether that's our physical performance, because we have more oxygen in our systems. It can affect our levels of flexibility, our stability, our cognitive performance, because we have more activation within the brain that's allowing us to think more. It can reduce our levels of pain, because essentially a lot of pain experiences in life is because the brain's not quite sure of what's happening, and that feels scary to the brain, to the nervous system. And so the brain is going to say, scary, throw pain so we stop doing it because I don't understand it. So as we give our brain more input, more understanding, more inner standing, if you will, then it's going to be less threatened, and therefore you will experience less pain. It's also going to help with our overall stress levels because, again, we are more capable cognitively. We have more fuel. One of the fuel sources of the brain is oxygen. And so we have more fuel to give it. It can work better. So when you're experiencing various life stresses, they're going to feel more manageable. It can also lead to better sleep, better digestion, better blood pressure levels, and even some immune system responses. Now, with all of that being said, as we go through these exercises today, I want you to understand that when I use the word exercise, most people think of going to the gym and picking up heavy weights. An exercise is something that you practice, whether that's meditation, whether that's breathing, whether that is picking up heavy things. We are practicing things. There are math exercises where you are practicing doing a mathematical equation or a certain style of art. It's all a practice. So we'll say breath practice with the caveat that this is not breath work. That's one of the kind of pauses that I get when I say that I want people to practice breathing. A lot of people are going to say, well, I mean, I breathe all day. Or when I'm stressed, I do take a big breath in. Or I don't have time for a breathwork practice. Now, breathwork practices are something completely different. Those are often activating the nervous system because of specific types of breathing. And they can take upwards of an hour to 90 minutes, as does meditation. And time can be a big hindering factor. So I want to kind of put that to ease right now. These breathing practices, once you've done these assessments, where we're getting curious about where our bodies are now, where our breathing is now, and how our nervous systems are responding to the way we breathe or don't. Once you have this understanding, the actual exercises and practices moving forward in your day-to-day life can take upwards of 10 minutes per day. I usually like to recommend breathing for 3 to 5 minutes in the morning and 3 to 5 minutes in the evening. If you can squeeze an extra one in the middle of the day, beautiful. But sometimes breathing more initially, because we're not used to it, is actually going to cause that nervous system response to say, pump the brakes, not used to all this oxygen, what's going on? And you can actually notice that yourself if you think of acute hyperventilation. So one of the practices with hyperventilation is it's recommended to give someone a paper bag, right? The reason for that paper bag is, first of all, it's bringing awareness because they have more sensory input, but more importantly, instead of constantly inhaling more oxygen, they are inhaling the carbon dioxide that's being expelled into the paper bag. So most people think in order to breathe well, we need more oxygen, when that's actually far from the truth. We need a balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So if we're getting too much of one and not enough of the other, our nervous systems are going to go into alert. Now, there are a lot of things that can put our systems into alert, but practicing the breath is going to give us more time and awareness back into our bodies. It's going to help balance that oxygen, that fuel response, and carbon dioxide in the brain. And it's going to give us a lot of benefits that don't necessarily take a lot of time. And as you go throughout this, I recommend having a piece of paper, something that you can write with, to notice where you are now, what of these exercises, these assessments, have various results. And then as you're practicing throughout your days, noticing which ones have more benefit. Do you see improvement in certain areas of your life, whether that is physical, stress, sleep, etc.? And then you can notice, where do you need to adjust. Now, I do recommend, for the most part, connecting with a practitioner, whether that's myself or somebody else who does more of a holistic approach. So where they're approaching the brain, the mind, the body. When I say mind, I do mean more emotional or psycho-emotional. Maybe it's a massage therapist, maybe it's a physical therapist. If you'd like some clarification, I can either do another video or you can message me directly or contact me directly and we can go over that. But I want you to understand as well, as we're doing these exercises, these practices, that there can be too much. Again, pump the brakes, right? So if you are saying, well, I've realized that I don't breathe very much, maybe I breathe really shallow, then you start breathing a bunch all the time. Again, the nervous system's going to go, we're not used to this, we don't like it, and you can actually start experiencing more adverse results. So there's a way to test for that as well. Now, as we do these tests and assessments, I want you to understand that this is all about curiosity. There is nothing wrong with you. Even if you can't get your arm up very high or whatever it is that you're testing, this is where you are in this moment. This is a snapshot that we can approach with curiosity and see what the body, the brain, the nervous system are doing now, and then see where they might be able to go. Maybe you can never, because of something structural, maybe you've had a procedure that's literally blocked and adapted the shape of your shoulder so you can't reach all the way up. That's not bad. There are ways that the body can adapt and respond without pain. There was actually a study. I'll try not to get too thick into the science of all of this because I do tend to nerd out on the neurology, but that can take a very long time. And I don't want to take too much of your day. We all know time is precious. But there was a study done not too long ago where they found that as they took images, so most of us say, oh, I've had an x-ray and I see that I have stenosis, or I see that I have a bone spur or something like that. And because of the education that we've had now, first of all, those very scientific terms can sound scary, so we think pain. But they did imaging of over 3,000 people, and of those images, when we looked at certain sections like stenosis, that narrowing of the spine, upwards of 90% of the individuals with stenosis had no symptoms. And there were a list of statistics. I'm going to pause right here and see if I can figure out how to put in this study. If I can't, I'll put it in a link in the description just in case you're curious. But something going on in our bodies does not necessarily have to equal pain. We can have tears, we can have scar tissue, we can have structural misalignments, and that doesn't have to equal pain. If our nervous systems are adaptive and flexible, so to speak, then they are able to handle shifts in our body without alerting us to pain. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment to show you that study. So I want to note as we do this, I'm going to be doing these practices, assessments, and exercises sitting because a very large percentage of us in the populace right now are sitting primarily throughout the day. However, there is a note there that whatever position you're practicing in is not necessarily going to equate throughout various positions. And what I mean by that is if you sit most of the day and you realize that your breathing is not very effective while you're sitting, that does not mean that practicing breathing while sitting is going to give you effective breathing while you're standing and walking, or while you're laying down, or while you're doing a particular sport or activity that you like to do. There's a lot of neurological reasons for that, with the input that our body is receiving from the joints, from the skin, from the muscle, from the lymphatic system, from the fascial system, etc., the nerves. But so because the input is not the same for the brain, practicing it in one location does not equate to other positions of the body. But because most of us are sitting a large majority of the day, I'm going to show you these exercises, practices, and assessments in a seated position, and then you'll have the same concept that then you can expand upon in a standing position, or as you're walking, or as you're lying on your stomach. Now, there is also some science that suggests that laying on our back is more beneficial for exercises involving the diaphragm, that deep breathing muscle at the base of the ribs. It, as we breathe in, goes down, it expands down to give us more oxygen, give us more space in the chest cavity and in our lungs. So laying down is the optimal way to do that. But again, if you're sitting most of the day, start practicing seated and then see what happens, okay? Now, I will start with a warning, so to speak, a little disclaimer that if at any point as we're doing these practices, these exercises or assessments, if you start to experience chest pain, any kind of confusion where you're just kind of feeling unsure, maybe you're just feeling really weird, if you're feeling dizzy, we are going to be breathing through our nose because nasal breathing is the most effective, efficient way to breathe, not only from a brain perspective, but biologically, as far as it's warming our air for us as it's coming through. We are breathing more slowly, so again, we're not hyperventilating. The nose hairs are filtering things out, so nose breathing is always the way to go, if that's possible. If you have a deviated septum or there's something going on structurally in there where breathing through your nose is less possible, then adapting the way you breathe through your mouth might be beneficial. I'm not going to get into that right now. Again, you can contact me. But if you start, while we're breathing through the nose, if you start to notice that your mouth is getting dry, pause. If you're getting, again, lightheaded, similar to dizziness, if you're starting to get spasms in the muscles of your hands or your feet, if you're getting tingling around your neck or around your mouth, into your arms, if you feel like your heart is palpitating, where you're having irregular heartbeats, or ironically, if you're feeling shortness of breath, or any kind of weakness where you're just like, I don't feel like I could push myself up off this chair, then I want you to pause. There may be something deeper going on, and either you and I can have a conversation, but I highly recommend at that point having a conversation with your doctor, because none of the exercises or assessments that we're going to be doing today are strenuous. They are all meant to be assessment based, where we are just observing and then doing the practices moving forward on your own should actually feel really good, because as we do the assessment, what we're looking for is, does my nervous system like this? Now, one more caveat. So when we do assessments in the style of work that I do, it's important to note that change happens at the speed of the nervous system. So whether that is a thought, an exercise, a sensation, our nervous systems are constantly taking in much, much, much more information than we are consciously aware of. And parts of our brain kind of titrate it down and say, this is what the user within this body needs to be aware of. Okay? But there are other areas that it's alerting parts of our body and our brain to that we aren't consciously aware of. So when we do an exercise or a movement, maybe we don't know that our brain doesn't like it, but doing these assessments will allow us to see whether or not it does. So even if you think of a stressful thought, nothing needs to be happening, but that stressful thought can immediately elicit a nervous system response in our bodies, where we start producing hormones and chemicals to respond to said threat or stress, whether or not it actually exists. And we have to kind of like reel ourselves back in. Same thing with these exercises. As we go through a breathing practice and assess how our nervous systems are responding, we can say, okay, my brain either really liked that exercise or it didn't. And the goal is not to just find what it likes and then stay there forever. Eventually, the goal becomes, can I breathe? Can I exercise? Can I move in any position, in any openness or closure in any exercise, in any movement, and still be efficient enough that my nervous system is not going to respond in a threat response, which then causes me pain, stiffness, frustration, like uneasy emotions. Okay? Beautiful. Now, some of the habits that we have during breathing, we're going to need to start undoing. So, like I said, breathing through the nose is the best way to breathe. And that's not an opinion, that is science-based. But habitually, we breathe through the mouth. More often than not, I mean, there are some things that show like the structure of our mouth. Like obviously, we're going to get more oxygen in a given period of time. So if you're having a conversation, it is more typical to breathe through the mouth, because to pause and breathe through the nose while you're finishing a sentence, and then you have to take in more air to continue explaining what you're explaining, would be really irritating. All right, I did that on purpose. I apologize deeply. I know that was probably really obnoxious to watch. But to my point, breathing through the mouth is more effective while we're having a conversation. It is not more effective while we're watching a movie, while we're driving, while we are reading a book. Okay. We also tend to paradoxically breathe. And what that basically means is we're breathing backwards. So ideally, as we're breathing, we start at the bottom. If we think of our torso as a cylinder, this three-dimensional piece of our body, we start breathing from the bottom of our belly, expanding the muscles down here into the abdomen, into our rib cage, and even up into our chest. However, societally, many of us have been kind of conditioned that we want to have a nice trim abdomen. So as we take a breath in, many of us are going to breathe into our chest and kind of collapse our stomach to make it look smaller. And then as we exhale, we kind of neutral out, but we're not getting that expansion in the bottom of our abdomen. And therefore, we're not getting the input that our brain needs to activate those areas, to exercise those areas of our brain. We also hold a lot of muscle tension. If we're frequently in situations where we're stressed and we are holding our shoulders up, especially, this is going to affect all of our breathing. Even having a rounded posture is going to affect our breathing, because we're collapsing in so much of our body that we can't get a good breath in. But even having tension in the forearms or the legs or the ankles, areas that we're not consciously aware of if we're not moving them, that tension pattern being held there, our brain and nervous system are still aware of. So ideally, as we go through these practices and throughout the day, if you're not using an area of your body, you want it to be relaxed as possible. And that goes for any type of exercise, whether you're doing Pilates, lifting weight, rock climbing, whatever the case is for you. If you're not using an area, you want it to be relaxed. That also goes for the stress of not being relaxed. And what I mean by that is, if you're doing, let's say, a lunge, and each time you get up from the lunge and you're activating your muscles, you're going, ugh, you're telling your brain, this is stressful. And you're practicing a state of stress. Now the neuroplasticity and neural pathways are saying, this is stressful, this is stressful, this is stressful. And it's raising your overall stress levels. So if you get to a point in an exercise, and I know a lot of physical trainers are not going to like me for this, and even like personal trainers, my take on it is, I would rather you do 3 really well-formed, easy exercises that don't cause, now there's a difference between pain and discomfort. We can breathe through discomfort. If something's painful, we don't want to go into that. Like, we don't want to continue doing something that's painful. I would rather have you do 3 fairly easy, maybe slightly uncomfortable exercises with really good form, where the rest of your body is relaxed and your nervous system is not anxious about it, than 10 for the sake of hitting 10. There's also some science showing that doing things in a stressed state in an emotionally stressed state, you may not get the muscle formation that you want to get. And additionally, your breathing's not going to be as effective as possible. And if you're not breathing effectively, then you're not getting fuel to the muscles effectively that they need in order to grow, in order to adapt. And then the other thing that you can watch out for, just notice throughout your day. Are you sighing a lot? Are you taking in regular gasps for air? And so, like, if you're having a conversation and you find yourself going between each, sentence or every few words, now, oh, that was a lot of breath for me. I'm aware of that. There we go. Or as you're sitting throughout your day, maybe you're not having a conversation and you just. Now that made me yawn because I was thinking about yawning. It's funny how that works. But if you're sitting there, a sigh, a gasp, a yawn is often an indicator that you're not getting enough oxygen overall. And so the brain is trying to compensate. It's trying to trigger a breath in so that we can get more. All right. Now let's get into the practices, okay, the exercises here. So the first thing I want us to be aware of is we can do these assessments on any area of the body. So first of all, let's just take kind of a physical inventory. And if you have that piece of paper, I'm going to figure out how to make like a worksheet. And you can print it out if you want to, so that you can do a little observation. And then as you do these practices, noticing where you're tight, where you're feeling restricted, what works, what doesn't, and then you can, extrapolate that and take that down the line. But taking a little inventory of your body right now. Do you know that you have discomfort in your right knee? Do you know that your neck tends to be tight? Does something feel stiff or like it's twisted just right now? Once you've noticed that and written it down, we are going to look at ranges of motion throughout any area of the body. So again, if you know you have pain in your right knee, you can use that as information. As you do a breathing exercise, try going into that activity that would normally cause pain. See if it changes. Give it a number. So if sitting here right now, your right knee has a pain level of a 3, let's say, and you know that extending your leg usually causes to go that to a 5, then you know that can be your practice, because again, we're testing the nervous system. It does not have to be the whole body that we're testing. These tests are also, right now, like I said, we're going to do these seated because most of us are sitting. So I want to give you some tools that you can notice throughout your day while you're sitting at your desk. And you can say, am I stressed right now? Am I breathing effectively? Let me test. Okay? So things that are easy to test while sitting is, first of all, going to be the neck. So as we do these exercises, most of us are sitting in kind of a slouched posture. We're kind of rounded forward. Essentially, our back muscles have gotten lazy. That doesn't mean that we need to do a crap ton of back exercises or force ourselves to sit rod straight for the rest of our lives. That's actually going to cause more pain because our abdominal and chest muscles have contracted and our connective tissue has gotten really tight on the front, again restricting our breathing, and our back muscles have gotten too loose. They might feel sore, they might feel tight. More often than not, that's because they're trying to pull against all of this abdominal tissue that is actually tight in the definition of tight. It's actually constricted. So the back muscles will get sore because our chest and our abdomen are tight and they're trying to pull against each other and fight. However, the more collapsed state that's been reinforced by our connective tissue is going to win. So you want to do those processes slowly. Again, we're doing 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 2 to 3 times a day, where you're sitting up. You can find a way. If this isn't clear, let me know and I'll make another video in the future, or you can reach out to me directly. You want to find a balance to your pelvic bowl. So we're not rocked with our pelvis sitting way forward, and we're not tipped with our tailbone under. You want to try to find a good balance point with those sit bones at the base of your buttocks. And then a nice straight-ish spine, as straight as you can get in this moment as you breathe. You might notice that shifts throughout your life. And then you can imagine at the top of your head, as if there was a string, and it's kind of just pulling your spine and pulling your abdomen and torso up. So if you're coming to it from this position, we can take a look at our ranges of motion beginning in the neck. So I really like if you're in a position where you can have specific things to look at to kind of note how far you could twist your head and with what amount of comfort or discomfort. We're just going to look, first of all, look all the way to the left. Notice if your head is tilting backwards as you look to one direction, and then look all the way to the right. Now for me today, my head is it's a little tighter going to the right. I can feel a little tension at the base of my skull. It's also good to note, I should have backed up. I've already done a warm-up for the day. I did my morning movement practice. If you don't typically do that, then do a few rotations, do a few of each of these exercises, maybe 5, so that you're feeling like you're kind of warm, and then see, oh, okay, that is my legitimate end range. You might also notice as you turn, I'm noticing right now in my collarbone, that it's kind of, my shoulder's kind of rolling forward as I turn to this side. So there's some tension there that I need to be aware of. The other beautiful thing with these practices is as you're doing them, you're coming back to your body. Most of us spend a lot of time in our minds or numbing out, whether that's with screens, with substances, with activities, where we're being more aware outside of the body than inside. So as you're doing these exercises and practices and assessments, coming back to the body is actually going to give you more choice down the line. Not only does breathing help with your emotional regulation in general, but the more you can pay attention to yourself, the more your body and nervous system can feel seen and supported, because again, it's trying to keep us alive constantly. So if it knows conscious mind is paying attention to us, conscious mind is listening to us, then it can go, we don't have to scream so loudly. We don't have to panic so much. And you'll have more choice in the way you move throughout your life physically and in the way you navigate stressful situations, among other things. But that's for a different video. So again, we're just going to turn, look to the left, notice what you notice, look to the right, notice what you notice. Beautiful. And then we can look up, and down. Now, obviously, when you're looking up, you can notice, like, how far into the ceiling can I look? When you're looking down, that might be a little difficult because our eye tracking, we might cheat and look farther down with our eyes than our head is capable of going. Today, I do have a little bit of stiffness in here. So I'm going to use my hand and say, all right, I am a comfortable 3 fingers with my chin from my chest today. And ideally, we want to get the chin all the way down without pain and without rounding the back to cheat. The other range of motion we can do for our neck is bringing our ear to our shoulder. I might need a pop. Nope, not there. And bringing our other ear to the shoulder. So you can see my right side is really tight today. It just is. Now, we also live in a predominantly right-handed world. That doesn't mean that you are right-handed, but oftentimes door handles, things like that, scissors even, are going to ask us to use our right hands. And so if you are right-handed, maybe you're doing more with your phone or writing or typing, whatever the case is, cooking, you're the opposite side of your brain, your left side of your brain, but we won't get, again, not getting into the neurology. The right side of your body is getting more stimulus. So not only will the right side of your body be tighter, but the left side will need more stimulus. And as we get into the breathing, we will activate, we will intentionally engage the side that is getting less input. So I've got a lot of tension in the right side. You can also do your shoulders. So whether that's bringing it up, seeing how far, if your thumb is on the top, I don't have enough space to show you this fully, but if you put your arm straight out, I'm already noticing a little tension in here, trying to keep the shoulder nice and level, keep the head straight, everything else in the body relaxed. Where can I bring my arm? It comes all the way up to my ear, but I do notice towards the back of my shoulder that there's a little tiredness in there as I bring it up. Okay, same concept, thumb up, and you're gonna bring it all the way up. What do I notice? I notice there's a little bit of tension. There's nothing particularly painful, but I also notice some tightness in my ribs. So as I show you these exercises, I'm going to encourage you with each moment, and there's a reason that I'm making this video as opposed to doing this in person as much as possible. I want you to be able to pause and notice without being observed. Sometimes observation, I've had some very well-intentioned clients, and if you know who you are, you know who you are, who will try to make me happy, so to speak. They're going to say, oh yeah, that feels better, because they want to feel better, or because somebody's watching them. They're going to change the way they're walking or the way that they're moving consciously or subconsciously because they don't want to feel broken, and you're not broken. Or whatever it is that you're trying to avoid by having somebody observe you and changing the way that your body naturally moves. So I want you to take this time to go through this and notice for yourself. So with each movement that you do, pause, really notice what is going on in my body in this moment. If you go with the arm out to the side and maybe it's too painful or uncomfortable to have your arm fully extended, expansion and extension, words are hard sometimes, you can have your arm bent and then go up. That's okay. That's totally fine. It doesn't need to be fully extended because these may be tight. There may be areas that are compensatory. You can also do kind of like scarecrow pose. Maybe this side's better for this. Scarecrow pose and kind of rotating your arm down and seeing how far you can get. Again, trying to keep that nice and level. Keep the rest of your body as relaxed as possible. I've got some tension in this side. Now, a lot of people will avoid that motion, and I hear this really frequently, that there's like crunchy noises, that they can feel things moving around. Without triggering any fear. Sometimes there's arthritis, sometimes there's some inflammation in the joint, sometimes there's weakness in the supporting musculature of the rotator cuff because it's a very complex joint. And so if there's weakness in a muscle, maybe a tendon is rolling. As long as there's not pain while you're doing that, I'm not super stressed about it. That's not like a huge red flag to me if there's not pain. As you do these exercises and movements more, there are ways to strengthen and support the joint as a whole so that those tendons aren't going to be shifting. There won't be space for them to shift. They'll be nice and snug between strong muscles. Okay? But if you're doing those movements and you're noticing some crunching in there, that same goes for the neck. Crunching happens in joints, whether that's the bones shifting upon one another, some arthritis in the joint, the tendons moving around, the muscles being tight and rolling. As long as there's not pain, we're, for the most part, okay. So a brief anatomy lesson here. So again, our torso is three-dimensional. So as we breathe in, if my thumbs here, if my thumbs are my back, so to speak, as we breathe in, we're not going in and out, we're three-dimensional. So our muscles are going, our ribs are going out and in all directions. That also goes for, and I wish I had a different colored chair. I'm wearing lots of black today. The sides of our ribs will come down and out to allow for that diaphragm expansion. So As we get into the actual mapping of the body and the torso and then the breathing exercises, I want you to understand I'm intentionally keeping this fairly surface level because there are neurological aspects that will affect our movement. And as you get more into breathing, more into kind of the nuts and bolts of the deeper layers of the science and the neurology of it, it can be a little complex to understand. And I am really much more interested right now in bringing you back into the body and helping you understand your baseline and the simple practices that you can do before you're trying to get to like Olympic gold status. There is a lot of benefit in really making sure your foundational practices are solid before going up into each of the other layers or levels of breathing. So I want to make sure that you're starting here. So I'm not going to give you anything too complicated today. And if you go through all of these and you're like, these all are super simple, then great. Reach out to me and we'll start getting into something a little bit more advanced. Now, back to being in the right-handed world, most of us are going to need more stimulation on our left side. You may be fairly well balanced, and so you may notice that as you go through these exercises, you get benefit from both sides. So regardless of what pain you're experiencing or discomfort you're experiencing or limitations, practice on both sides with each of these exercises and see how your nervous system responds. If it responds negatively to an exercise, cool. We're going to avoid that one right now and we're going to do the opposite one. If it responds positively to one, focus on that. If it responds positively to both, stick with both. We're giving our brains more of what they like, or more of what it likes, so it can feel more supported, and then we're going to go from there down the line. Now, again, we're three-dimensional, so we have our muscles right inside our hip bones. If you feel along the hip bone, and I have a very short torso, so I'll make a note of that. My rib ends right here, and my hip starts right here. I don't have a lot of space on my side. Not everybody is like that. We are all very different, and therefore our brains are all very different, which is beautiful. So there is no judgment in any of this. Another reason I want to give you a video as opposed to an in-person assessment. But as we follow the structure of the hip, you'll feel this kind of pointy bone right at the front. And then inside that, you've got muscles that should expand and contract as you breathe. So what I want you to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to map what's going on in your body. So if you put your hands inside those hip bones, with your fingers there, it doesn't have to be light, but use as much pressure as you can notice. You're going to breathe in and notice, do both sides of that area inflate equally? Or is one side inflating more than the other? And then breathe out. And as you get a really full exhale, see if you can kind of flex and tighten and use those muscles there. And notice, does one side feel stronger than the other? And you pause if you need to, do it a few times. It takes practice to make these observations. And then we're going to move up to kind of that hourglass spot. Again, three-dimensional, so our thumbs are on the back of our body. Breathe in. Does one side of the rib cage expand more than the other? The front, the back, the sides. And breathe out. Is there more contraction and movement in one side as opposed to the other in one area? Maybe the back right rib compresses more than the rest of the body. Make note of that. Okay. Then up on the ribs themselves, breathing in. And out. Do you notice the ribs coming in equally? This one's a little harder to notice for most people. So right below our collarbones, right below the clavicle, there are muscles, and there are muscles up here that help us all with inhalation and exhalation. So if you kind of flex, I don't want you to roll your shoulders completely, but if you kind of put pressure there, then breathe in and out. What do you notice there? That gives you an idea of where we breathe. Now, one more thing to note is there are ways, again, in the more kind of advanced practices to utilize tools, or if you're having a really hard time noticing where you're breathing in or out, then you might need a tool to help with stimulation or help with noticing. But what I want to do right now is give you not just the basics, but something that you can do anywhere, anytime. Okay, I don't want you to have to rely on a tool that you then forget at home. We're going to start right here, and then we're going to see where you can get. And if you need something further, reach out. Having an understanding of where you breathe, I want you to now, we're going to stimulate certain areas of the body, and then we're going to assess. And as we go through this, again, we're going to take just that checklist. Notice, what do we do? What happens? Pick one range of motion if that feels easiest for you, but you can also go through each and every one of them. That's a personal preference. So the first thing we're going to do is, it's a little complicated because I have a new microphone. So you're going to offer some skin stimulation. This is not massage, like trying to break up or loosen any muscles. This is literally just taking your hand and rubbing it on your skin. So I'm going to take my right hand and I'm going to stimulate the skin all along my torso into my lower abdomen, because again, that's where we breathe into at the bottom. I'm going to reach back as far as I can, up into my ribs, all the way around the side. And you don't want this to be very cumbersome, maybe 20, 30 seconds. It does not need to be a lot. The nervous system gets stimulated and it says, yep, I liked that, or no, I didn't. And then you can practice that longer or shorter. So, okay, I've done, I don't know, maybe 15 seconds there. I'm gonna take a breath in and I'm gonna notice that feels better to me than it did when I first assessed. And I'm going to check the left side as well. And that feels about the same. So notice what you notice in your body. So now I'm going to take my left hand and stimulate the right side of my abdomen, right into the lower hip, into the inner hip, into the front, to the sides, to the back. And you want to try not to put too much contact. Like, I'm not going to use my right arm for anything, or the opposite arm, because I don't want to cross those neural pathways. I don't want to confuse the brain on what I'm trying to ask it to assess. So a little bit there. And that definitely feels tighter to me. I can feel more tension in here. So I don't need more stimulation on my right side. It actually made me a little dizzy to do that stretch after stimulating that area of my body. One other thing to note as far as patterns go, so if you're a female bodied person or somebody who wears any kind of chest constraint like a bra, it might be beneficial to practice without the bra. First of all, there's a whole thing I can get into on the detriment of underwire, but having this compression here while you're trying to practice breathing and expanding it might be a problem. You might be wearing a bra so frequently that your nervous system is always going, this is uncomfortable and I don't like it. So maybe try, if you're home alone, practicing these breathing and assessments without a bra on, or without something that's compressing. Other people's nervous systems really like that compression. So see what works for you. It's all very individual. But I will always shy away from underwire. There's a lot of science on that with the lymphatic system and our nervous system that I don't like underwire. If you can avoid that, avoid that. But Okay, so just some skin stimulation in there. Okay, now I know, again, I know for myself that my body, my brain and nervous system like stimulation on the left. Hopefully you may have noticed, with that neck exercise that I just did, my neck is tighter moving towards my left ear after I've stimulated the right side of my body. So I'm going to do these exercises for the sake of time. I tend to be windy. I'm going to do these exercises and assessments just on the left side of my body, with the understanding that you can test on the right side of your body as well. And again, you might experience benefit from both sides. So take the time to pause after each exercise and do that assessment on the opposite side. It's going to take you a little longer. This might take you up to 90 minutes, but then you'll have all the information and you can do your breathing practice. Okay, so that was just the skin stimulation. Now I'm going to take those muscles at the front of my hip and I'm going to offer just a little bit of stimulation. I'm going to breathe in and I'm going to think about pushing those muscles away. And just relax on the exhale and breathe in. And relax on the exhale. We're going to do one more here. Making sure the rest of your body is relaxed, but I am actively thinking about pushing away those left fingers. And then test. Again, my test is the neck. Oh yeah, that feels a lot better. Feels a lot better. And the left side feels about the same. Beautiful. Now if we think about the opposite action, so I'm going to take those left fingers in my left hip and I'm going to forcefully exhale. This is just bringing awareness to that area for me right now. So if I breathe in so that I can then exhale. Do that 3 times. And noticing too, are there specific areas that don't seem to engage as much? Okay, and assess. Got about the same result there. It might be a little bit easier. I still feel some tension right along the collarbone there, but great. Okay. Now again, I'm going to use just my fingertips right on the inside of my abdomen, and I can feel my thumb on the back, and I'm going to do an inhale. And I'm going to think about breathing more into the left side of my body. I can squeeze a little bit if I need more stimulus to push those fingers away. And if you notice any cramping or like a threat of cramping, don't go to that point. Your body's not ready for it yet. That's okay. Focusing on the inhale. And test. That one's a lot better for me. And then same thing, but we're going to focus on the exhale now. And contracting those muscles. Noticing if I need to relax my shoulder. Okay, notice what you notice. Ooh, neck like that one. That one's still feeling pretty good. Pausing for you. Awesome. Now, right up on the ribs, the actual ribs. Now, you may have noticed that a little bit if you have a short torso like me, but we're going to give a little stimulus right on those ribs, and we're going to think about breathing more into the left side. and out. Relax on the out. So we're not focusing on the exhale right now, just the inhale. Wiggling if you need to relax another area. And check. I would say that one's about the same, maybe a little bit more tension there. So maybe my body doesn't like so much inhale focused on that specific spot. And up just below, above the clavicle. Can you get those to expand? At the same time, we're still using these lower abdominal muscles. We're just making sure we're getting air all the way in. Okay, and notice. Going through the same concept with this area of the ribs and focusing on the exhale and then seeing what that does. Going up here, focusing on the exhale where these muscles are contracting and tightening, pushing the air out and seeing how that does. So after you've done each of these sections, so that'll be the lower middle, the middle, and the upper in all areas, notice what happens. If you find an area that you noticed offered a lot of benefit, then what I want you to do is practice 3 breaths. See what happens. Notice if it's positive, neutral, or negative. Then maybe practice 5 breaths. Positive, neutral, or negative. There is such a thing as overdoing it. Our nervous systems, even if you think of medication, right? So let's say you have a headache and you need to take ibuprofen. You don't completely trust ibuprofen, so you pull out the pill and you cut just like a sliver of it off. It doesn't do anything, right? Same thing with the exercise. If it doesn't do anything, it's not enough. Okay? But maybe you take 3 times what it recommends. That's too much for your health. We can overdo exercises, even such as breathing. So try it 5 times, see if you still get a positive response. If you don't, if you get a negative response, go back down to 3. That's okay. You can work your way up. Same concept. If you're breathing in the beginning and end of the day, notice if you're getting positive or negative results. Can you increase that to 3 sessions a day, maybe at lunchtime for 3 breaths in that specific area? And then start to expand around the whole body, the whole torso, and notice what you notice. Is there anything else I want to add to this? There actually is something that I want to add. So if you're experiencing chronic pain, oftentimes with our nervous systems being on such high alert from that pain, rather than solely practicing on one of these exercises where you're engaging the muscles to inhale or exhale more efficiently, start with a breathing exercise to increase the relaxation response. So that often looks like an inhale that is, well, I'll say an exhale that is twice as long as the inhale. So let's say you breathe in for a count of 2, so full big breath as much as you can for 2 counts, and then breathe out still through the nose for a count of 4. And then same test with whatever joint or range of motion that you're wanting to test and see how your body does with that. Now, typically with those longer exhale breathing practices, you can do those quite a while, like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes sometimes. If you're noticing yourself actually anxious, you can do these breathing exercises and it will help a lot. So if you know you're about to do a breathing practice or you're about to do something stressful in your day, doing the breathing practice with the long exhales before you do anything will help you be able to approach it much more effectively from a much better space. If you don't like the let's say 2 in, 4 out. You can also try triangle breathing. And I'm just going to use a number, so you can pick whatever number works for you. But let's say like in for 3, hold for 3, out for 3, and then in again. Or some people prefer box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4 before breathing in again. Now, the holds at the top or the bottom, depending on what you've been through, what your experience in life is, and your nervous system, those holds can sometimes cause a stress response. So again, you're just going to have to test and see what works for you and then go from there. I think I'm going to stop right there for today because we've already done a lot. It's been a lot of information. Now, if you have any other questions, always feel free to reach out and contact with me. There are things that we'll be doing coming up in the future because breathing, again, is coming back into your body in general is going to give you more agency over your life, but there are things like body work that can help. There are specific exercises, working with a practitioner, understanding your patterns and habits as far as like your personality goes or moving throughout the day, things that you notice. So it is very holistic, but just focusing on the breath right now. Potentially one thing that might be valuable to you is that's going to be, I believe it's August 24th. I'll put it in the details section of this video. I have a workshop coming up with another massage therapist practitioner on body work for personal agency, where we talk about the fascial systems and breathing and what you can do to notice and stretch and move through your body on your own. Because I don't believe that any person should ever rely on a practitioner such as myself. My best case scenario is I never see you again because you feel wonderful and you know how to take care of yourself. So with all that being said, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I can always come back and edit or expand on something. But I hope you have a beautiful day, whatever time it is for you, and that you start breathing a little bit more effectively.